Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, thank you all for what you do respectively. I apologize I was not able to hear some of the questions from colleagues, but again, these are issues that are so key and so important. I appreciate, Captain Jones, you mentioning the Project Hope program and how it is working or helping in Alaska. I mentioned in my opening about not just the opioid and how that's ravaged us, but alcohol. And I will just cite to our annual drug report that says, acknowledges the multifaceted drug abuse problem in the state. Drug abusers in Alaska tend to abuse more than one substance, oftentimes multiple, and drug of choice is alcohol, heroin, meth, cocaine, prescription, and marijuana, but they emphasize that alcohol was the single most abused substance. So as we have been focusing our efforts here in Congress on opioid, I don't want us to lose sight of the fact that underlying so much of this is alcohol, and fail to provide the support for programs and grants in that alcohol space as well. And so when we're talking about substance and substance abuse, making sure that it's alcohol and substance abuse programs. But everyone's shaking their heads like you agree with me. We don't need to bifurcate these. These are all one big, ugly, horrible problem that we are dealing with. Let me ask about the I'll call it a workforce issue, but our reality is that we have identified the problem and some of the solutions, but we know that so much of this comes back to making sure that we have mental health professionals that are able to be there, to be that support. I have been working with my colleague from Indiana, Senator Donnelly, on an effort that would incentivize those to go into the substance use disorder treatment work. Basically, it's a loan forgiveness program that we think will be helpful in incenting more, because I have to assume that part of the challenges that we're facing is we simply don't have enough mental health professionals to help us. Is that also, I'm getting head nods, we need to work on that as well. So here's my question coming to you, and this is intended to help at least 3 individuals that are in the audience. I met with the mayor of Utqiagvik, who is with us today, and 2 others that are part of her council, and they've mentioned that in Utqiagvik, formerly Barrow, the issues relating to opioids and drugs, again, the intensity we can't single out enough. But from an enforcement perspective, and I'll look to you, Mr. Anderson, they're saying that we don't have they don't have a district attorney there. The prosecution for these drug offenses are not moving forward. So the drugs come in by mail, the drugs come in by plane, and that's it. We know how they get in. But because we can't get attention on anything unless it's at full federal or full felony level, that people know that they can sell, they can deal, they can use, and there's no follow-up, there's no consequence, there's no enforcement. What would you tell the mayor of Utqiagvik?
Senator, I would urge the mayor and to work with, to seek federal grants to develop that type of thing. There are federal grants available through the Department of Justice's Comprehensive Opioid Abuse Program, and I would hope that those could be used to develop that type of legal infrastructure that you described in your question and in posing that issue. Certainly, it is an important component of addressing this crisis that we have that law enforcement infrastructure in place. And I understand that in your states and in many of our tribal communities, there is a shortage of access to courts and related resources. I would urge those communities to apply to the department's grant program to be able to fund that type of infrastructure. I think that is critical to proper enforcement in combating the opioid epidemic.
Well, I appreciate that, Mr. Chairman. I also recognize that we hear from a lot of our constituents that we're basically setting tribes up to compete with other tribes when they all have significant need. And so you've got some tribes that perhaps might not have the bandwidth to submit. I think in a community like Utqiagvik, you're probably different, positioned a little bit differently. But it is something that I recognize. We've got some gaps. We've been talking about tribal courts and the opportunities that they may present to help address some of these issues on the enforcement side. But we know we've got a lot of work to do. I'm over my time. I could spend all afternoon with you, but thank you again, and thank you for your work.